I'm not sure if you guys hear this, but there's like a buzzing sound.
I hear it, yeah.
Yeah, I hear it too.
So maybe, Valerie, you have like a fan or something?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, can you hear it now?
No.
No.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
there
you.
it is again.
Wait,
Oh,
it's back.
It's my computer.
Mm.
How about that?
yeah, that's better. It's gone.
No,
I know it's back.
Came
and
right
it's not
back.
mine.
Oh, huh. Here,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna mute. I'm gonna mute myself.
you think, well, I don't know, maybe it is mine, I don't know. I'm in the same place I always am in.
So I think you're like waiting on maybe one or two more people who've signed in to show up, but maybe Max can walk everyone through how the meeting is run.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do that. That'll give people another moment. So for anyone that's new, you'll remain muted throughout tonight's presentation. And oh, there we go. And if you would like to participate, you'll have to go down to the participants icon at the bottom of your screen, click that, and then press the raise hand feature. And once it's your turn to speak, I will have to manually unmute you and just be on the lookout for a little pop-up to confirm.
And if you're on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute.
Sorry about that. Yes, if you're on the phone.
Is Shelby on?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, since he's our first agenda item.
Okay.
Will, can
I guess I'll lengthen, or you want to lengthen the introduction?
Well,
Well, I'll talk first, and then Alita can speak, so this way I can. Oh, there he is. Okay, great. Thanks, Shelby. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the first Small Business Committee meeting of Community Board 8. in the hopeful year of 2021. Thank goodness 2020 is in the rearview mirror. We hope this is the beginning of a great year for the Small Business Committee, and most importantly for the small businesses in Community Board 8 area. We, I think, ended our last meeting on a happy and high note in terms of trying to get our community out there to support our small businesses. Alita and I were very hopeful when we put the agenda together for tonight's meeting that in fact there would be a stimulus package that would be passed by the end of the year. And, you know, it came a lot closer to the end of the year than we thought it would, but it did in fact get passed. So in that respect, unless Alita has anything to add, I would like to introduce Shelby Garner from Congresswoman Maloney's office. Shelby is not an unfamiliar face to Community Board 8, but this may be the first time he's appearing as the Chief of Staff of Congresswoman Maloney's New York office. So congratulations, Shelby. And I'm going to kick the floor off to you to tell us about the stimulus bill and how it hopefully will positively impact small businesses on the Upper East Side and beyond.
And I just want to echo the congratulations, Shelby.
Thank you. So I think that, you know, most people on this call are probably familiar with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the emergency impact disaster loan programs that were part of the CARES Act back in April. Those programs are being extended. There are certain changes that hopefully will be beneficial for small businesses in CB8's area and throughout our city, especially for restaurants and other businesses. The PPP program is being extended until March 31st of this year. There are set-asides for the smallest businesses, businesses that employ fewer than 10 employees, and for minority and women-owned businesses. The number of non-payroll expenses that are covered in this new round has been expanded. So for restaurants, for example, things like any cloud applications or software that they need or accounting costs can be covered. It's still staying with the 60-40 split where 60% has to go towards payroll costs for the full forgiveness amount, but now 40% can go towards mortgage payments, rents, utilities, but also some of the things I just mentioned, and also PPE, personal protective equipment, and any expenses that were related to meeting federal or relevant local health guidelines. The EIDL loan program is also being extended, and additional grants will be coming through that. There's also rental assistance for individuals that's part of this, but that's less for small businesses and more for individuals. But there's also for venues, for theaters, for live arts performances, museums, certain museums, comedy clubs, and things like that. There's now going to be a new grant program for those businesses, and those grants will be up to $10 million, and with the possibility of a second grant up to 50% of what the initial grant disbursement was. In the first 14 days of the program, those grants are going to be open to venues who can demonstrate 90% reduction in revenue. And then after that, in the next 14 days, it will be extended to venues that can show a 70% reduction. I think a lot of the measures for the small businesses were meant to keep what was the strongest and the most beneficial aspects of the CARES Act going, but also to simplify the process. So for smaller grants and for smaller loans in the EIDL program and the PPP, the application is going to be streamlined and simplified. And all the documents, every business should continue to keep all the documents if there's the possibility of an audit by the SBA at the back end. But in terms of getting that money to businesses, they're going to be streamlining the application. And for the smaller loans and the smaller PPP loans that are convertible to grants, the application is going to be now a one-page application, is what we're being told. We're still waiting on some clarification from the SBA, but that's right now what things look like. I'm happy to try and answer specific questions, or if you have very granular questions that I can bring to the small business administration, or to the House's Small Business Committee, which is chaired by a great New Yorker as well, Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. I'd be happy to do that. And our office is, of course, always open, and I will share in the chat my colleague's email, Taylor in the New York office, who would be happy to help any small businesses navigating the SBA process, or trying to get more information. It looks like Matt has a question, so.
Go ahead, Matt, you're unmuted.
Yes, thank you, and thank you very much for the message. I feel like I don't talk radio. Hi, Shelby. One quick question is, in the old iteration of the PPP, there was a lot of gaming that was being encouraged by businesses regarding which type of financial institutions that they should go to. A lot of people went to their local bank, and here on the Upper East Side, there's many very large banks, and they had a limited number of PPP that they could give out. And so they were encouraged to go to go to CDFIs and other banks around the country. How is the choice of banking and choice of lending institution be handled in the new PPP?
So, I mean, I think that there's still the encouragement, if you have a long-term relationship with the bank, as that would be the first place to kind of go and speak to. But especially for smaller businesses, which in the first round we found were sometimes shut out of loans from the larger commercial banks, there are specific set-asides in this round of the PPP for credit unions, smaller local banks, and for CDFIs, community development financial institutions. I think it's there are two set-asides of, I believe, 25 billion each for those institutions. Sorry, 15 billion each. So those, I mean, if you are a smaller business, I would encourage you to look at some of those mission-oriented lenders and the CDFIs and credit unions, because they seem to be, at least in the first round, much more amenable to processing smaller businesses' loan applications in a way that the commercial banks were certainly supposed to. It was supposed to be a very strict first come, first serve. But some of the larger financial institutions, and I think there's going to be continued oversight over that rollout as we continue going forward by the Financial Services Committee and by the Small Business Committee as well. But we, in this round, the House was cognizant of that, and so that was something that House leadership fought very strongly for, to be included in the final package, the set-asides for smaller financial institutions, which were a little bit more amenable to processing the smaller loans. I hope that was helpful. Samantha?
Hi. I own a small business, as some of you might know, on the Upper East Side, and I can confirm the issues with the bigger banks and having much more luck with a smaller lender that I had never heard of prior to applying for the PPP. But I had two questions for you. Are you hearing anything, or is there any clarity on there being a threshold at which the PPP will be automatically forgiven? We got a very small amount because we are not a labor-intensive business, and I've been sent the forgiveness. You know, it's not terrible, but it's a multi-page, you know, multi-step thing, and I've heard kind of chatter about there being a $25,000 or some sort of threshold where they would just say, "Don't bother with it." Are you hearing that? Is that factual? Is
So,
it
I've heard similar kinds of rumors to what you've heard. We are waiting on definitive rules coming out from the SBA, and I am happy.
no
you know,
timeline on that?
Yeah. So the SBA is supposed to have all the rules done within 10 days of the enactment of the legislation,
Oh, okay.
which I think is tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully we will have some guidance by the end of the day tomorrow. I don't know if there's it is certainly a legislative directive from Congress to the SBA. I don't know what happens if the SBA does not fulfill
Right, but
that
details
requirement.
like that should kind of be forthcoming
So
as this. We're getting closer to it.
Yeah, and we're trying to get all those details compiled, put into memos that we can share with businesses. But if you, I'll put my colleague's email in and mine, and if you shoot us an email about that, we'll certainly follow up with the relevant committees and with the SBA. Awesome.
And then just one more kind of rumor-based question. Well, this one I had actually read. So we got the EIDL, and a very small piece of it was the grant. It was 3,000, not 10,000. And so I've read some things about reapplying for this next round, but that you would have to be in a low income area. I just want to make sure. I'm kind of good with what we got, but I just want to make sure that no stone is left unturned if I should be reapplying.
So if you send the specifics of your business to me, I'll try and get you an answer specifically for you.
Okay.
What I've been seeing is that it requires you to be in a low income or moderate income, like LMI.
Side is not. Okay.
And in that case, the idea is that if you reapplied, there would be the possibility of the SBA would be able to disperse a grant, which would be 10,000, the difference between what you got in the first round and 10,000, with the idea being for in traditionally underserved communities, making sure those businesses got the full 10,000. Right now, it looks like it is you have to be in one of those LMIs. Good. I think there's a possibility of, there might be a possibility for minority and women-owned businesses.
Right.
So if you were to shoot me an email about the specifics of your company, I'd be happy to have me or one of my colleagues try and get you a specific answer. For
awesome. I just want to make sure what we're hearing here is on track with what the real news is. So I appreciate.
Well, I mean, that was certainly a very confusing thing in April and in May with the CARES Act. It was very much, the rhetoric was there was going to be this 10,000 grant, regardless of whether or not you were going to get the full EIDL loan amount. And then, we were hearing from businesses getting 1,000 here, 500 there, and not the full amount that they thought they were entitled to.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Shelby, hi, it's Alita.
Hi, Alita.
Hi. When you have any documents or sample forms or rules, would you just send them over to the board office so we could include them on the committee page?
Certainly, I can send that over, and I can also send the relevant information from the Small Business Committee, but also from the web pages for the SBA. That'd be great. That links would be great. I have a question. You mentioned rent relief, but mostly for individuals. Do you mean residential rent relief? I mean, I'm a little confused about rent relief. So yeah, it's residential rent relief, and actually, the provisions on that, I was getting the information on that today. So it is housing, though. It is not small business rent relief, but it would be creating a voucher program that people could apply for. It would be a needs-based program that individuals and landlords could apply for on behalf of their renters who have not made their full payments. And on top of that, there is an extension of the CDC eviction moratorium until the end of this month.
Is there any interest in providing potential rent relief to small businesses? Because my understanding is that so much of it goes back to the way the banks finance the mortgages from the landlords, and the landlords' subsequent inability to lower rent. Otherwise, they're in danger of being in default on their loans. So it seems that anything to help needs to come as a legislative thing. And then I'm also wondering about whether there's any pending legislation, I guess it's not part of the stimulus bill, but to deal with the insurance companies and their refusal to pay for COVID on grounds that it's not business interruption.
So on the first side, I think on the federal level, there is an interest in trying to work towards some rent relief for small businesses. I think that is going to be an incredibly difficult lift. I think there is a lot of resistance to that as well. I think what ends up happening with the makeup of the Senate is going to be somewhat determinative there. But on a local level, I think that there is also a big push to try and get significant financial assistance, federal financial assistance to the state and to municipalities to give them some of the flexibility to develop programs like that. I do think that New York City is in a rarefied area in which rent really is such a bigger part of business expenses compared to payroll, as opposed to more nationally, payroll is usually a much bigger expense. So that's something that I think that, probably the best chance there is to try and get the direct federal funding to go through the states or go through municipalities to try and get that help. So
a question from Kaz. I'm sorry.
Oh, and Alita, on your, just before we go to Kaz, on your second question, in terms of the pandemic risk insurance and the fact that the insurance companies were not paying out for business interruption insurance because of that. I think that's something that there are on the state level. There's a couple bills in different places around the country that are trying to retroactively address that for insurance policies that are regulated at a state level. There is a lot of guidance from council that retroactive legislation on the federal level would be thrown out by the courts. I think there are some people working on that and looking at it, but so far there's been a very strong belief that it would not pass judicial review. That being said, the Congresswoman is working on legislation right now for forward-looking pandemic risk insurance. It's a bill modeled on her Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. It's called the Pandemic Risk Insurance Act. After 9/11, businesses in New York couldn't get terrorist risk insurance. The only company that was actually providing plans to New York businesses for a while there was Lloyd's of London at incredibly high rates. The Congresswoman did develop a terrorism risk insurance program in which the federal government would backstop insurance companies up to a certain amount. to lower the risk for the insurance companies and allow them to feel comfortable putting up policies or selling policies to businesses. This would be a similar kind of thing for pandemics and business interruption caused by pandemics. So that's something that she is working on right now, but that is forward looking.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kaz.
Cause?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, this isn't about the penny, Shelby, so relax. With the EIDL loan and the PPP, once you get the EIDL, that becomes part of the PPP as far as forgiveness. So if I get 10 on the EIDL and 100 on the PPP, they will only forgive, they count the EIDL as part of the PPP. So I'm actually getting 90.
So that there is a change on this, that is not, in this bill, that it was section 110E6 of the CARES Act, and that has been repealed. So the PPP borrowers no longer have to deduct the amount of EIDL advance from their PPP for forgiveness.
Is that retroactive or only on the new one?
I can get you an answer on that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay. Now,
but I will certainly look that up.
Okay. The other one is that you calculate on 2.5 months of salaries and expenses on that. So for those 2.5 months, I have 5 employees. I open up and I have 10 employees. So now I've applied for 100. I spent 150. Can I update my original? There is something in the second one that if you haven't fulfilled or if you haven't closed out on the first PPP, you can up the value of what you applied for. But once you've been forgiven, that's the end of it.
So I think that is right. Again, if you want me to ask the SBA on your specific situation, I'm happy to do that. I do know that, in terms of applying for a new PPP, you do have to show that you have spent the entire amount of the last one or that you are going to before you get the second round PPP disbursement. But in terms of if you have expanded your employment, I would have to ask for specific guidance on that from the SBA.
Okay, but why do I have to prove that I've spent the first one when they already have forgiven it?
If they have forgiven it, I think that you're probably in a situation where if they've forgiven it, they think that you have fulfilled all the requirements of it.
So I've got to reprove that I've spent.
I think that if they have forgiven it, they will probably, they will have the record that you have spent it and that they have forgiven it. But there are some people who applied, as a later round, and they still have some of that funding. And when they apply for a second round, they will have to prove that they have spent it.
Okay, thanks, Shelby.
Other questions from anybody in the audience before I ask a few?
Not seeing any currently.
Okay. Shelby, you said that tomorrow you're expecting SBA to post some regs for this?
So they were given 10 days from enactment, and that would be tomorrow. So, that's when we're expecting it. I have not heard anything coming down the pipeline. I did ask this afternoon if anyone from the DC legislative staff had heard anything. They had not yet. But I think that we are getting to that deadline.
Mm-hmm. And so would those be the final rules, or sort of the final rules subject to modification as they were sort of in the last round when some of them didn't work and they had to be reevaluated? Is that the way it works, or?
So I mean, those would be the rules, hopefully finalized, but the way the bill is written, the SBA does have some leeway to make modifications.
So in that connection, like if the small business owners that we have on the call this evening were to read them and have questions, they would perhaps email you and or Taylor to say, hey, you know, this is great, but it's really not going to work because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever.
I mean, absolutely. That is something that, like, whenever, when we were hearing things from small businesses, we either were trying to address some things legislatively, including pushing for more money going through the CDFIs and things like that. But it's also something that we can work on letters directly to the SBA administrators and make suggestions to them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things you mentioned about these grants, and I'll grant you that I don't have a small business, but that some of these grants were only open to businesses that were in more economically challenged areas. I mean, you can make the same argument for our small businesses that are located in areas where the quote unquote wealthy have fled. They wouldn't be considered an economically, disadvantaged district, but the small businesses are even sometimes more impacted because their customer base has gone away.
I think furthermore, also, especially if you're looking at the hospitality industry, long before the pandemic, New York City restaurants, 1/3 of them failed within their first year, the razor thin profit margins. And when you're talking about a place like the Community Board 8 catchment area, you're talking about some of the highest commercial rents, in the city. And there were certainly plenty of businesses that were already operating with razor thin margins. So, it is something that we are cognizant of. And I'm, happy to work with any small business in the district that's having issues. But, in terms of passing national legislation, there was a focus on generally lower income communities and areas.
Mm-hmm. But you think, and you're going to follow up with us about, exceptions for minority and women-owned businesses that might.
Yeah, and there's certainly, there certainly are set-asides for PPP and for EIDL loans for those businesses. And I will try and get a specific answer on the full grant amount for the EIDL advance.
Mm-hmm. I want to, and I don't mean to surprise you with this question, but in terms of the overall legislation, and this is not really a small business question, but related to it, when the first round of PPP came out, there was a little bit of at first there was no provision for it, but that PPP would be available to co-ops and condo buildings. And then I understand that this round does provide for that, but I think it has to do with if you have or had if you were getting income from some kind of commercial enterprise. So, I mean, I don't mean to surprise you with this question, but do you have any information on that?
I do not. I'm happy to look into it. Okay. That level of granular detail, I would have to talk to our financial services ledge staffer. Okay.
Because my understanding was, and don't take this to the bank, anybody, literally, was that if you were some kind of co-op and you had like a garage or retail space and that you don't have a tenant anymore, that any loss of income, you might be able to apply for PPP for that. And then if it resulted in you laying people off or whatever. So I'd appreciate it if you could get back to us on that, if not only for this committee, but for the greater community board, since in this district, obviously, we have a large number of co-ops and whatnot. Does anybody else have any questions or want to review anything with Shelby?
I have a couple of questions, Valerie. Shelby, when the administration changes, is there any anticipation that the application of the rules or anything that could be modified might be modified?
I think that in terms of this program, probably not, because the rules are being at the SBA. The SBA is a tiny agency by federal standards. It also, because it is kind of it was kind of a backwater for political appointees. So it was not politicized in the same way that a lot of other agencies were. And that, at least that's my understanding. That is what I've been hearing. And so a lot of these rules and interpretations were coming out through career civil servants. That being said, if there are specific things, again, I'm happy to take them to the Congresswoman and with the idea of working on a letter to the SBA administrator. And I think we will see some changeover in that agency along with every other agency. But anything that the Congresswoman can take to the transition team, we'd be happy to reach out on behalf of people with concerns and try and get it into their ear. But hopefully, if there is a more beneficial political climate at the end of the month in Washington, we will see subsequent relief packages as well.
And then you mentioned that it covers cost to comply with health code compliant, I guess, with health code provisions. Does that include all of the outdoor dining?
So I have already put in that question, and I'm trying to get an answer on that. The way that the language is written, it clearly talks about personal protective equipment, PPE. It does not specifically talk about outdoor dining, but it does talk about federal guidelines and additionally relevant local health guidelines. And I am trying to get clarification on whether that would include outdoor dining and the investments in creating those spaces.
There must be such variation among small businesses around the country, from those in some states that don't really care so much and some states with different weather, so that building for outdoor dining, they just always have outdoor dining. Are there other things that are specific to New York City or New York State that don't apply elsewhere around the country, or vice versa, that businesses here might find useful to know?
I mean, I think that New York is I think part of the reason that we all live here, it is a unique place, a unique and special place. But I think there are a lot of issues that affect New York City businesses that are very different from the rest of the country. So again, I think that in terms of full support for New Yorkers at large, but especially for our small businesses, I do think that there's going to have to be, the federal response. But I do think that, especially with the attempt to provide significant federal funding for states and municipalities, allowing New York and New York State and New York City to have the flexibility to really tailor solutions for our unique situations.
And then I just have one more kind of related to that. So I think, if my understanding or my recollection is correct, the last time around, there was a lot of money that went to much larger businesses. Is there, and there was a lot of criticism because of that. Is that right? Am I right?
So yes, I think that that is sometimes a more complicated issue than the press kind of made it out to be. I think that there were a lot of franchises around the country that did take advantage of the PPP program. A lot of them had kind of corporate assistance in applying for it. But at the same, kind of the other side of that token is that a lot of franchises around the country are immigrant and minority owned small businesses. And so I don't think it's necessarily good to say that there are all these giant corporations, giant brand names that took advantage of it, but there were certainly several institutions that did take advantage I think Danny Myers here in New York City voluntarily did return the PPP funding after it came out that Shake Shack had taken a significant amount. There is provisions in this legislation that just passed barring sports organizations and political entities from applying for PPP loans, and that was something that happened in the last round as well, where some very successful sports franchises and less well-known ones were also taking PPP funding. But I think the biggest thing in terms of trying to make sure that the smallest businesses are available to access this federal funding in this round is that there are set-asides for small businesses. And there's specifically an entire set-aside for small businesses with 10 or fewer employees.
And so you did mention that everything is simplified, but if businesses in CB8 area have trouble with any of this, is there, how can they best make sure that they're doing?
They should reach out to our office.
Okay. And you'll
any federal agency that, anytime that a resident of Congressional District 12 or a small business, or any business located in our district is having issues with a federal agency, we're happy to reach out on their behalf. We can often get answers a little more quickly. We do have access to congressional liaisons at every federal agency that their entire job is to respond to inquiries from congressional and Senate offices. So, we are happy to try and get answers more quickly. But I think right now we are also one of the few offices that, or I think this is starting to change, but we've been physically open, operating on a very much a reduced staff level. We've been kind of operating on a skeleton crew in the office, but there have been people coming with more local issues as well, because they want to drop off paperwork, and we've been working with our colleagues in state and city government to try and address issues at the state and city level as well. But if you're ever having an issue, you can always reach out to us. And even if we think that the best person to handle it is maybe a city council or a state assembly or state senate office, we're more than happy to loop them in and get them involved on your behalf.
Thank you so much. That's I'm sure bound to be really helpful.
And before I forget, I'm going to put in my email and my colleague's email as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, for those of you who joined late, Shelby's putting in the contact information for the people in the New York district office for the Congresswoman, so that if you have questions or issues, you can email them. And I will say they are quite responsive. So Shelby's not telling a tale. Thanks a lot, Shelby. We really appreciate, when we asked this question, that you guys jumped at the chance to talk to us about this. And obviously, we appreciate you giving us information on a go-forward basis. And maybe if we have any, if there's any updates between now and our next meeting, maybe we can catch you for a couple of minutes at our next meeting to update us. And in the meantime, we will definitely try to act as a clearinghouse for anybody who contacts us with questions. So Happy New Year, and thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy New Year to everyone. And I will send over any subsequent information to both you and Alita so that you can post it on the website.
Great.
Thank you so much, Shelby. But before you go, does anyone else have any questions from the public or the board?
Last chance.
This is a great opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you, Shelby. It's
Have a great evening.
Great to see you. Have a better year and Happy New Year.
I hope we all have a better year.
That's exactly right.
Thanks. Okay. Well, we don't have anything else formally on the agenda. So if anybody has, is there any old business anybody wants to raise? Is there anybody up there?
I think people are quiet after the quiet New Year's.
Oh,
that we had.
Kaz is raised.
Oz, I'd be disappointed if you didn't have something to say.
I've got a question on enforcement. The SLA is inspecting, some establishment 2 or 3 times a month or several times within months for, one or two minor infractions. I'm walking around the neighborhood and I'm seeing fully enclosed establishments on the sidewalk, on the street, and they're there 7 days a week, forever, and indoor dining has been banned. So where is the enforcement? Also, I was walking by a place the other day. There was a DOT inspector measuring the building on the sidewalk. It's on the sidewalk, so they've got 4 feet of the sidewalk on the curbside, 4 feet or 2 feet right next to the establishment. There is only a 3-foot pathway for pedestrians and people to walk through. It's enclosed on 3 sides. It is still there. I asked the board office about that, and they said, oh, the building will get a fine. They will get a lien on the building, but it stays up there forever. So they're taking up the sidewalk, 3 foot of clearance. It's on the sidewalk, which is illegal. There's fully enclosed establishments everywhere. Yet the 1 or 2 place, like the Green Kitchen that lost their liquor license, okay, they had an infraction, maybe they deserved it. But in the meantime, one small business gets all the inspections and everything, and you get hundreds, if not thousands of others blatantly breaking the law, yet they're open. So where is the equality in inspections?
Well, we discussed this at our last meeting or whenever it was when Colleen was at our meeting from DOT.
Yeah, and she wants to know the location.
Right,
Good.
and she wants the community to be a tattletale, and I think you called her out on that very, very honestly, Kaz. And that seems to be, unfortunately, the method of enforcement that they are using. When we told her, very honestly, all you have to do is walk up 2nd Avenue between, whatever street you want to pick to go up to 86th Street, and you could stay there all day long and call out, I want to 80% of the restaurants on this. Mm-hmm. Look, I feel badly. I want these places to succeed. We all want them to succeed. But I think we've all acknowledged that, there's less than 3 feet of walking space right now in most of these places that have outdoor establishments, especially those that are not on a corner. And they could have an inspector full time on the Upper East Side handing out fines all day long. Unless I don't know what to say. I don't know how, the point is, I mean, how much enforcement do you want? I mean, I hate to say it that way, but do you want it enforced enough that, all these indoor, outdoor restaurants are taken down? I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I mean.
No, but I'm not trying to say, fully enforcement, but you're going to get these 1 or 2 places that there's going to be a spike in the cases, and then the other 999 establishments suffer. So these few are causing the problems for the many. So, not so much to enforce it, but to let the people know that they should do something about it.
Well, I do know that, some of the biggest tattlers, if you will, are restaurants ratting out other restaurants because some are in a better position than others.
Right.
And so, there's almost sort of like, I hate to say it this way, sort of a self-enforcement of brother sister restaurants, if you want to put it that way, who are ratting out each other because either one person has a ton of business because they have these who are, I don't want to say taking advantage of the rules, but obviously noticing what we're noticing, that nobody is really coming around and enforcing it. And it's sort of like out of a Clint Eastwood movie today. How lucky do I feel today? And people go with that. And to a certain extent, you cannot blame them. But I mean, I don't know how long this is going to go on. And the question is, because our mayor has already said that these rules will stay in effect for at least another 8 to 10 months or whatever, end of the year. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, we can have DOT come back next month to talk about it. But again, I like you do not want to be somebody who's calling up, ratting out restaurants for not quote unquote following the rules. But they all have to be aware. I mean, in front of your committee, when Green Kitchen was asking for the community to support them, I mean, I again, that's probably coming up at your next meeting, right? I think they asked
January, I think, yeah.
Tomorrow, isn't it tomorrow night?
tomorrow,
Yep.
asking us to support the reinstatement of their license. I mean, I don't know. I want to have an open mind as to what they're going to say, but in the same vein, I mean, if you openly flaunt the rules and you get caught, I mean, that's like a kid saying, but he stole a cookie out of the cookie jar too. Yeah, but you did it when I was looking. So, I mean, you both took a chance. One of you made it and the other one didn't. I don't know what else to say.
It's hard.
There are different issues, though. The width of the sidewalk and the ability of pedestrians to walk by feels like it's a different issue than whether restaurants are four-sided with actual windows that open and a door that opens and shuts, as opposed to two sides, which we know is not a healthy environment and puts people at risk. So,
well, but I mean, it's still a breaking of the rules, Alita.
Yes. Oh, I don't disagree with you at all. And it's very easy to see without the tape measure that Kaz is talking about when a sidewalk, a sidewalk building is enclosed or not enclosed, whether it has plexiglass doors and ceiling and is not following the two sides need to be open. And when it isn't, they don't need to be out there with a tape measure. And you're right, Valerie, from what you said, that all they have to do is go up and down 2nd, 3rd, Lexington, any street, and they'll see it. It's also, I guess, the flip side of enforcement is, and I know I've brought this up before, is the ability of restaurants to be treated evenly and fairly depending on their location. And the places next to fire hydrants or bus stops don't have the ability to open an outdoor space, and what happens to them. So, but that's another issue. Marco has his hand up, Valerie.
Go ahead, Marco.
Go ahead, Marco. You're unmuted.
Oh,
Marco, go ahead.
Try one more time.
can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay. The issue that caused the restaurants, some of them, they have probably more money and they have a good structure outside and capture more clients versus the small business that cannot afford to do that situation. They starving and probably going to close. That disparity cannot exist. The problem is if you try to enforce in the other side, they're gonna accuse us that we are anti-business, and that is not our intention. So I did with the East 79th Street Association a walk on the area, and we found that there are 42 restaurants that have completely violated the whole law. Some of them they comply very well. So the issue is how those that complain versus those that do not complain. And that is the biggest problem right here. We create some unfair analysis in the process. And I believe that at this level, we have to let it run whatever they want. But let's go in that direction. My concern is what happened after the pandemic is over. Once they put a very strong structure, I see even a scaffold put it on the side on the road. Impossible to hit the wind or anything. What happened now? Now they're gonna say, now I have a grandfather. That is the biggest concern that I have, and that is why we need probably to enforce the regulations, put a notice that they are violated. That probably maybe later we wanna ask to forgive, like we're gonna do most likely tomorrow with the green kitchen, because Alida, you clearly you demonstrate, your son demonstrate they are really violators in that part. But tomorrow he will come with remorse. That's what he did, and I'm planning to accept remorse, but I'm planning to see, well, you did a mistake, good. But now tell me how you going to mitigate that problem. Because if he's gonna say, no, I'm just gonna move this way or the other way, I'm gonna say no, because actually he has to impose himself his own rules that satisfy all of us. Because otherwise the other restaurant said, oh, this guy, he did that and they was forgiven. So let's go do that and they're gonna forgive us. So it will continue. But the end of all of that, my serious concern is what happened after the pandemic. And that is my serious concern. And then they will come those structures that very well built, some of them. Others, like the Eli's on Third Avenue, they tumble on the 24th. It was tumbled completely on the street. And he removed. But the problem is unsecure some of them because they try to be in compliance. Those they are in compliance, they put strong structures outside that even uh, tolerate large quantity of snow and even the winds and everything. So we are in big dilemma. If we ask to penalize them, then they will be accusing us that we are against small business in these hard times. If we don't do that, the other business that comply, they're gonna say, why do you allow to do these people? And then we create some unfair system. And probably my impression is we have to tolerate until the end of the pandemic. But we have to have in records that those people, they are violated the rules and they had to remove as soon as the pandemic is over. Otherwise, we're gonna still fighting them later. What's gonna happen with these people? How are we gonna remove these structures? So far, we are okay with the snow because the snow was less than was predicted. Now, just imagine when it comes in a very heavy storm. And it's going to be a nightmare. So, and they're going to complain that the city is doing something wrong. The community doesn't help them to do the small business. We are in very complicated situation, all of us. We want to do the right thing. We want to help the small business. Nobody is saying, let's go close the small business. No. What we try to do is find something that help us in the future. Hopefully this year is going to be the end of this pandemic. I hope so. Thank you.
We
Thank
have
you,
a-
Marco. I just want to maybe Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go. It's okay, Valerie. I was just going to ask if anyone from the public, anyone who owns any of the businesses in the neighborhood would like to respond or offer an opinion about what they think is reasonable or fair. But go ahead, Valerie. That was just a question.
Well, I think Marco's point, I mean, is very valid. And I think we've been, again, trying to address this, but I think maybe the answer is because obviously we do want these businesses to survive. They are part of the fabric of the community and what makes the community a really great community to be in. But you know, this is almost like adverse possession, if you'll excuse me, I'm just bringing my legal practice here, but I mean, I think in some ways, the restaurants and you know are seeing an opportunity to grab space that they wouldn't ordinarily be entitled to, building some of these structures which are semi-permanent at the least, hoping that they will be grandfathered in at some point. And, you know, maybe the next step is, I don't know, do we have a representative of the borough president's office on? I think maybe the next step is to probably have a discussion with, obviously we're never going to get anyone from the mayor's office to participate in any of our meetings, but maybe to try and invite to our next meeting DOT and representatives from our council people to sort of talk about, you know, what the plan is for this on a go forward. Because I think too, even, you know, and to give the restaurants some slack, you know, nobody, you know, everybody started out making this temporary. I think some of the programs that the city was instituting were to make the businesses feel like they weren't going to invest money and it would be taken down in 3 months. But I don't think we've gotten a lot of vision from anybody in the city government about how this is all going to play out. If we're all hopeful that by the fall, you know, we will hopefully be returning, or at least starting to return to life as perhaps we knew it, with some modifications. So I think you know, we should be looking forward, and we should be, you know, working with the small businesses as well as, you know, that's my favorite cause, you know, sidewalk and pedestrian mobility to start talking now about, you know, what the sidewalk and streetscape is supposed to look like when we move back. Because, you know, obviously a lot of the sidewalks have been vacated by even street vendors because there is no traffic in a lot of places. And when they come to reclaim their spaces, it's going to, you know, it is already a mess, and it will be a further mess. And the thing I'm really worried about is, you know, access for disabled people, you know, people with children who are trying to walk down a sidewalk where they can only walk now single file. So I think maybe this is a good topic, you know, to continue the discussions. You know, you don't want to wait until the day, you know, we've seen this now in many instances related to this pandemic, related to the day of, you know, the vaccine showing up and trying to figure out who's going to get it. Let's try to figure out what the plan for the sidewalks are now, before the day comes when we're all back on them, because it is going to be a fight for a very, very valuable piece of land that, you know, in my mind belongs first and foremost to a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk. And, you know, we still haven't gotten any answers about what happens to a business that paid for an outdoor cafe license. No one has even said whether they'll be entitled to a refund of their money. So, you know, I mean, at least they could have gotten that money back for some of those businesses, no matter how large or small that outlay was, to get it back, to help them through this terrible time. I mean, on our last meeting, one of the restaurant owners, I thought, had a great idea about being able to withhold the sales tax, at least for a while, and or other. I mean, those were some of the most creative ideas I had heard, in terms of giving some of these businesses a chance to survive going forward. So anyway, I've been on my soapbox long enough, but maybe, you know, we can try to get some city representatives to come to our next meeting and try to discuss some of the really good ideas and issues that we're seeing now and how they're going to unwrap these things. Because I thought Alita's question to Shelby regarding whether those structures are going to be seen as a necessary expense to deal with COVID, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as well. So,
well, it's an interesting time to think about reimagining the city, and the point about the fees that businesses are paying for outdoor cafe space or had been paying is another example of what hasn't been fair in this whole process. So the city, I think, has some things to answer for, and the outdoor restaurant program has been rolled out for quite a lot of months already, but it seems that there's still instability. There still are a lot of questions. There still is no enforcement. There still is a perceived and I think realistic idea that it's not fair to a lot of businesses. They have questions, they have stuff to answer for. So I think you're right, Valerie, trying to bring them back and answer some of this to the extent that they may know. Plus there'll be a new administration in a year. And what impact will that have? And does this become an election issue is what happens to all of these businesses. We're not the only community board that's had significant issues about outdoor space and how it's being used and what's going on.
all right, well,
I see Samantha has a hand up actually.
oh, great. Go ahead, Samantha.
Hi, I was just going to say, I totally agree with what you guys are saying as far as trying to get anyone, whoever's in charge, to have a little, you know, a vision of how this is going to get undone. And I think relying on the community to essentially do their jobs of tattletaling or saying there's not enough room to pass here or there and call it into someone is just shirking their own responsibilities and putting it back on people who already are worried. I'm worried about my own business. I don't want to tell on the restaurant next door to me. He happens to be lovely and has let me use his space, so I'm not going to do anything to disrupt his program. But I think it's unconscionable to this far in to not have a thought process of how it should be policed, how it should be, you know, fairly dispersed. You know, no one has told me how many people I can have in my business, so I made it up. And if someone ever came to say it was the wrong number, I would say, good luck. I reached out to 20 people and no one could tell me, so I made it up. So I think, you know, there's just, if they want to micromanage every detail, then they've got to actually do it and not just walk away. If you could see it by walking up 2nd Avenue, then all they should do is walk up 2nd Avenue. They shouldn't wait for someone to call in a complaint or tell on somebody or not be able to pass with a stroller. So I think to the extent that you can hold their feet to the fire very politely would be appreciated by the business community.
Well, that's good to know. And before, I know Marco has his hand up again, Valerie. I want to be clear that I'm not minimizing the need for people to be able to get across on sidewalks. I've always been very vocal about houses that want to encroach on sidewalk space for their own needs as not being appropriate. I just meant in terms of the ability to breathe and not get sick from being in an indoor-outdoor or outdoor-indoor place. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And whether we could get people from the city government that actually do know anything or are able to go back and get information from the people who do know something, I don't know. But I think it's certainly worth a try to be able to get answers. And it's not right to put the burden of enforcement on the population. That puts people in a terrible position because someone did you a favor, and no matter how egregious, maybe, I don't know where the line would be, but why should it be you? Why shouldn't it be whatever the city agency is? And there are a number of them that are supposed to be splitting enforcement. They talked about everyone, the fire department, the health department, DOT. Anyway, Marco.
Thank you. You want to talk something, Will?
He was probably
Oh,
telling me to shut up.
No, I was just gonna chime in and say that like this is how the city has to be. They cannot have enforcement officers for every block of for every item. There's not one person who knows every responsibility for a street vendor, for a sidewalk cafe, for parking regulations, so like you would need so many people. So the city relies on people like me who are walking down my street and hear the manhole cover rattle, and like I don't live next to it, but I take a picture of it, send it into 311 so that so that somebody else can get a better night's sleep. Like this is a city, this is a community. Like we should all work together to like make it better and not feel the responsibility that we're like hurting other people by like reporting something that we find to be a problem. Like that's just how the city works. And so I mean I understand there's a disagreement here about that, but like there's just no, it's like either we all need to voluntarily go up to like 75% tax rate so that we can employ 3/4 of New Yorkers to be enforcement agents, or we all just like do our part as
Well,
that's
wait
what
a second.
311's for.
Okay, well, I mean, we have traffic cops walking up and down the blocks that we're already paying for that can very easily be handing out fines. It's not for the citizenry to tattletale on every
That's a misstatement, and I think that's a villainization of city workers to use tattletelling and like we're all reporting a problem.
No, we're living in a community, and you're asking me to rat out a guy who
rat out. The use of these phrases seems so negative. And
well, it is. You're asking me to report him and saying he's violating the law.
It's not the same with the manhole cover because that's an inadvertent situation that no one designed to deliberately see how much they could get away with. And you have to think that some of the people putting up the plexiglass ceilings, walls, front doors know exactly what they're doing and are hoping not to get caught. We know the Green Kitchen. I already spoke about this in December, so I'm not shy, but we know the Green Kitchen had a whole host of violations. They deliberately allowed people to violate a host of rules. It's not, there's a continuum, I agree, but a manhole cover that inadvertently is out of whack is not the same as what the Green Kitchen did.
Oh, of course. I know
you know that. I know that.
But here's the thing, Will. We're in a very, what I would hope would be a very compact period of time. And the city made rules, right? And as typically as the city does with everything that they've rolled out, right? They roll out bike lanes, but then they don't come up with who's supposed to enforce them. They have street vendors and they have nobody to enforce those rules. So
there are answers to both of those questions.
I have a full-time job. Why is it my job to walk around the city? Yeah, I do what you do. If I see a manhole cover or I see a situation that's out of whack, I take the time and do that. But I can tell you that there are a few of us who do that because they think that they're paying taxes and that whoever they're paying taxes, whether it's the police, the enforcement division of the community of consumer affairs, the health department, EPA, all of whom have enforcement divisions, then that's what they should be doing. Because there's no sense in making a rule if you don't have anything to back it up. Because otherwise, in this culture, in this city, people will get away with what they can get away with. All right.
I mean, we all jaywalk, right? Like, no truer example is there than like we all jaywalk. Like that is a violation of the rules.
Well, that's true, but that, and why does that happen? Because nobody gets a fine for doing it. If you do that in LA, you'll get a serious fine.
Yeah.
So that's
I just wanted to like, I'm always going to defend the city and like city workers who are doing their best. And I will always defend the.
I'm not saying that a city worker is not doing their job as they have been told to do it. What I'm saying is, I don't think it's the job of Kaz Spagnoletti or Valerie Mason to walk up. First of all, if I walk up and down the street and I go into a restaurant and I say, you know, you're really crowding the sidewalk. Can you be a good citizen and go to 5 feet? They say, F you, lady, and get out, mind your own business. So I'm going to take my life into my hands to do that? No, the Department of Transportation should be doing their job, which they said was enforcement.
Well, the other side of the coin, though, is if they're
Thank you. I just wanted to like chime in, and I politely disagree, but you know, go back to your meeting. I didn't mean to interrupt, and I'm so sorry to.
Will,
No.
you raise a valid point, and you should always feel that you can say something and contribute to a discussion. You come have a different perspective working for Garodnik, so it's different. But the other side of the coin is if businesses, if the restaurant's putting up this plexiglass stuff or steel reinforced walls out in the middle of the street, feel that that neighbors, that people might call 311 or might call the police or might call the DOT, then they may be encouraged not to do that kind of stuff. Maybe they take more risks precisely because they know the city doesn't have the ability to send out enforcers on a regular basis.
I mean, I was in a restaurant when we were allowing indoor dining, where the guy running the restaurant, the diner, said to the patron who walked in the door, do you mind if I take your temperature and your contact information? You would have thought he was asking for the guy's last pint of blood, and he refused to do it. And I turned around and I said, please, can you just help the diner owner out? He's not doing this because he really cares where you live. He's only doing this so he can keep his restaurant open and the Department of Health doesn't come here and close him down. And you know what the woman said? Do you want us to eat here or not? And I said, you know, be my guest. I said, and you know, if you get COVID, not on me. I mean, you know, and the restaurant owner said, Valerie, it happens every hour of every day. Yeah. And you know, you're right. In a more perfect world, and you know, I think we've done a lot, to your point, in terms of trying to work together and enforcing. But again, at the end of the day, you know, that's what happened to the Green Kitchen. And so is that, you know, where do we end up with that? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But
well, let me ask you a question, Valerie, or anyone else who's here who knows the answer. If someone can, and I'm sorry, Marco, I know you have your hand raised. If someone is trying to get through the space between the outdoor tables and the establishment and trips on an obstacle, whose responsibility is it? Is it the city who didn't enforce its rules or require compliance with them? Is it the small business that crowded because it's desperate to stay in business? I mean, I don't know if that makes a difference to how businesses are acting either at this point. And I'm sorry, that's my legal hat.
Well, I mean, you know, look, it's going to be, well, I don't know. I'm interested to hear what Matt has to say about businesses in his bid that, I mean, they must not, I don't want to say complaining, but there must be some discussion amongst businesses about how some are, you know, not getting fined, some are getting fined. I mean, I don't know. What is your experience in your bid about actual enforcement and consequences of enforcement?
I'll always give the example. I get a lot of questions to me about people putting out A-frame signs for years and years. And you know, Madison Avenue is a zero visibility street and you can't put out an A-frame sign. And well, they see other people on the block doing it. And I said, well, you know, you can, here's the rules. And I'm warning you though, if you do it, you know, chances are, you know, you may not get hit, but if you do and someone trips and falls and something happens, your liability insurance will say that you're not following the rules. And because you're not following the rules, you're not going to be covered for insurance. So the risk of having this A-frame sign, this goofy A-frame sign in front of your store could actually be a catastrophic hit to your store. If it falls down, you never know. People are very litigious because you won't even get covered by your insurance to fight it. So I think that what the reality is that, you know, so many people are doing this and they are taking this, I mean, remarkably big gamble. And, you know, I think Alita's point about, you know, if somebody gets caught and something happens, someone gets hurt and they're not following the rules, you know, they're taking a tremendous risk with their, you know, with their call. But I think you see this degree of desperation that people are willing to take this risk, and you know, it could really come back to bite any business very, very badly. And but yet they're fearful. They're you know, they're sublimating their fear of risk because things are so bad. You know, I think that if there was very, very even enforcement, it would be very easy. Obviously, you're going to get caught. Just don't do it. But when there's not, and there hasn't been for a million different rules over the years, except when someone makes a call and complains, you know, they're going to keep on taking it if they feel there's the cost benefit. And that's what they're doing, is they're saying, well, yeah, I could get sued for a lot.
Right, like for example, in the Green Kitchen instance, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They lost their license. What kind of deterrent effect do you think that had on anybody else in the neighborhood doing what they have done and what they are doing? I mean, I don't know if it has or hasn't. So
it's a long story about, you know, businesses that take, you know, that pay with cash. You know, they get money cash and you're not reporting all the cash. Well, you know, you get away with it. Then when you try to get a loan, all of a sudden you show, you know, the expression of the pizza place that never made it, you know, you're trying to get a loan and you can't get a loan because all the money, you know, so these things have consequences over time. And I just think that we're in a very, very, I mean, I don't have to tell you, you all know, but we're in such a very bad situation right now that people are willing, they're taking risks that are potentially devastating.
well, also, do you think that, you know, some of the restaurants along the bid, do they think that they're making a short-term or long-term investment in these outdoor edifices, for lack of a better term?
I think that the mayor said that this is permanent. So I think they're making a long-term investment in that, with a long-term perspective that things are they're gonna be able to do this. So, you know, that's why they're, and I think, you know, we have the same discussions among the bids about what the future is going to be that you're having here. And I mean, I think there really does need to be a greater direction for the public realm, and where, you know, where all these intersecting demands reach. I mean, we have loading zones too in parking lanes. You have the need for commercial, all these things that are, you know, that are competing for the same sidewalk space. Mm-hmm. You know, we advocated for the open storefront program because of that would be, you know, helpful for retailers, and, you know, not as much on Madison, but another city. And but even on Madison, it allows you to do, you know, things that you wouldn't be allowed to do otherwise. Mm-hmm. I think there really is this feeling that, you know, this is going to be going on for the longer term. I mean, open storefronts is now through, I think, through September. So it's the whole following summer. So
I just want to flag that we do have a new member that hasn't spoken yet that just raised their hand.
Just what I was going to say. Thanks, Max.
Sure.
It's
Go ahead, Diane.
Diane Malika Moomin Pinkston, if I've got that correct. Diane? I think you're unmuted.
You're
You are
unmuted.
unmuted.
Try your volume, Diane.
You hear me?
Yes.
A little better, yeah.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah,
Oh,
but if you could raise it a little more, that might be better. Thank you.
no, it can't be raised
Okay.
any further.
Just come closer then.
Yeah, okay. So
Great.
can you hear me better now?
Better.
Oh, okay, so I'm gonna have my face up in the camera a little bit closer so you can hear me better. So I noticed how Mayor Bill de Blasio and the city had started a special program for if a pedestrian or even a motorist notice a car idling for more than 2 minutes, to just take a picture of the car, tag, and to send it in to the city, and they would get a little stipend. Have you guys heard about that?
You mean the person calling it in gets a reward for calling it in and sending a photo of the exhaust and the license plate? They get money from the city?
Yes. Have you heard about that program?
No, there from a legal point of view, there seem to be some issues with it, if that's accurate, but I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so my whole point also of mentioning that is that I feel so sorry for the businesses in the community. In fact, this evening, when I went to walk to the corner store, I almost tripped on an establishment that was outside. And I wanted to say, you guys are raising some very significant points in discussing, how we don't want to hurt the businesses in our communities because, we need them and they're beautiful for us. They're so convenient for us. But at the same time, we don't want them to pose danger to us and our families. It's just like if someone was walking down the street with a loaded gun and pointing it at people. What is the difference between an establishment having unsafe conditions, which can cause someone to hurt themselves? So I just wanted to mention that, guys.
We appreciate the comment. Thank you. I don't know, is Ronald raising his hand? He's not raising his virtual hand, but he's raising his real hand.
Let's find out. Ronald, click
unmute. Hi, my name is Ron Buchter. My affiliation is through the United Neighborhood Houses of New York and Lenoxville Neighborhood House. I'm the chair of the advisory council for the elder adults division, and I have been for a number of years. And we have specific issues as older people in the community. I can look back many years ago. I lived in the Greenwich Village near Washington Square Park in a community board too. I remember our issues had to do with, because of all the tourism and tremendous amount of traffic on the sidewalks, that became the most important issue of our community because, so many people use the sidewalks. And now here on the Upper East Side, since we've had problems with delivery people on bicycles, bicycle lanes, problems with cars turning, and all sorts of things that really impact seniors because of their sight issues, low vision, hearing, whatever else, coming to the curb and being able to get across the street. And now we have one more issue, which is all of these structures around town. And well, we have to think in terms of the future that a lot of the groups will come forward and who are impacted, and such as our group. And we have to start thinking about what are the dangers. And from our side, I do appreciate businesses. I want to see every restaurant in the neighborhood do well. And I'm concerned about any businessman or businesswoman that has invested so much in having a going concern, and that's our community. All the food stores and all the restaurants. But at the same time, we have to think more in terms of how how the other cohorts are sharing that space. And so that was my 2 cents as far as a lot of these structures. They can eliminate people from viewing the bike lanes, for example, or coming to a curb and having to go around some structure. And now somebody has balance issues. So most people, unless you're my age and you understand what goes on when you start hitting 60, 65, 70, things start going physically. And a little issue like, an extra something else in your path becomes a big issue. And I see in the future, different lighting issues and maybe areas where there are naturally occurring retirement communities within our community board, where there are a lot of buildings where people are mostly over 65 and they're living there, and or some of the senior centers. So those people there are crossings that are the equivalent of school crossings, where people are where drivers and other people on the sidewalk have to be aware that there are slower moving people that may not have all of their physical attributes on par with them. So I think there are a lot of questions going forward on as far as these structures. I imagine that things have to go back to, if things do go back to normal at any time in the next 2 years, then there are businesses that they have to go through a process to get outdoor licenses. We all know that, and they come before the community board, and your community board becomes, or our community board, I consider myself part of it now,
Sure.
becomes very important and essential part of that whole process with the Department of Transportation and all the others. Appropriate agencies. I know that recently down on the Lower East Side, I'm active down there as well, around the new Trader Joe's off of Delancey Street, there's been a tremendous change in traffic patterns and bicycle traffic. And there have been a lot of meetings held last year with citizens in that community, and the Department for Transportation and Transportation Alternatives, and the Borough President's Office and all the other essentials, and they got things done. So I think there's, there has to be some kind of action plan going forward, and everybody has to step up and say, if I want to be part of this going forward. I want to represent my group of people, or whether it be business owners, a parent that has children in school, a local worker, or people like myself, elderly. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, I wouldn't consider you elderly, but thank you, Ron.
I'm just going to quick jump in actually for 1 second, Valerie, and say that Diane's earlier comment, a link to that article about the city paying individuals for posting pictures of idling vehicles has been put into the chat.
Oh, thanks a lot, Max. Appreciate that. And thank you, Diane. Okay, I think let's wrap it up. Kaz, we'll go to you first, and then Marco, unless anybody from the public has another.
Yeah, Valerie and Alida, you're both in the legal system, aren't you?
It's kind of sidestepping it a bit.
So tomorrow, I'm just looking for somebody to represent me against the city tomorrow when I go and trip on the sidewalk in front of an establishment.
No, I think the city has a law that they have to have pictures or a map with an indication of where every pothole is. And I don't know
this isn't the pothole. This is in front.
I know. I don't know if that applies to sidewalks too. I think it's an attempt to avoid exaggerated reasons for injuries, let's say. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Kaz.
They enabled the establishment to break the law. But tomorrow when I trip, can I count on them?
Well, I know the name of a good lawyer who specializes in that type of thing, and I'd be happy to give you his name offline.
And make sure you get bystanders to take photos. Lots of photos.
Thanks.
I kind of think this conversation would impede your lawsuit, but that's okay.
And it's not being recorded though, so don't worry. I think Marco.
Thank you. I think we had to start preparing a plan for to reopening our community. And before I give a description of the plan, I would like to say something extremely important that I just read this weekend, the plan of Cody Johnson, a plan that describes that the city has been working, he described as a piecemeal actions. So that means it has been working useless, in other words, because there is no direction, there is no plans. They need a comprehensive plan. That's basically what it is, this plan. So the diagnosis about that is because I hear right now that Matt said, oh, the mayor decided that the sidewalk affairs is forever. So this mayor, he shouldn't start talking like that because he's leaving next year. And that is unfair. Administration has to be responsible in any decision. So if we find an irresponsible person in the mayor, we have to start preparing against him, planning ahead. And one of the plannings what I start doing is at the end of the pandemic, it's gonna start complaining everybody, we need money, we are starving. Well, what we have to do, start doing is right now, is to find out what is the business, who receive the amount of money in our community, how much they receive in benefits, and how was the impact of those in creation of jobs. We had to see what are the violations of this structure they put it outside. So then we can have an idea to who we had to help, because at the end of that, usually the smart guys, they figure it out always to get ahead of the rest. And those people that are behind always will be the strugglers. And we had to be fair in our decision. And we had to prepare for that moment. That's what I said, planning ahead. And the planning, by the way, of the comprehensive planning is excellent. But I have I discrep in some of the issues. But the planning will be effective in 6 years from now. So 6 years from now, it's gonna be too late for many business. So another plan is to have to create this small business, a plan for education, the small business. Especially the liability issue. The liability issue is they think that they are okay, but just wait until they find an attorney. The attorney, let me explain you what happened in the history of this accessibility for the restaurants. An attorney, he figured it out on the Upper West Side that there is no accessibility for the handicaps. And they put together like a 20 restaurants, obviously 20 restaurants. Now for the attorneys become business, because now we're talking about millions of dollars. If you put a lawsuit for one, the attorney said there's no business. But the attorneys they try to create business until they figure it out. That's basically cause in a joke manner. He put the way that I'm trying to explain that educations that for the small business, don't do the wrong thing because you're gonna get in trouble. And thus we have to create a plan so we can reach them and tell them don't do that, because sooner or later, you will find out an attorney that is willing to pick it up 10 or 20 restaurants easily. And then you're talking about for him millions of dollars. And then you're gonna find this is the right way to move. So my idea is, let's go start preparing some information, some planning ahead for the reopening. Let's go prepare those violators to have a record of them. So then when we have an opportunity to discuss at the moment that we're gonna go back to the reality, so then at least we have an idea where we can start. We can start for those that really that the struggles on the whole process, because many people probably don't qualify for this second help. So we need to have these kind of ideas, and I think this committee should be leading in that direction. We need to be moving in that direction.
Okay,
I think that is my opinion.
I agree with that, but I just want to go back to something that you said earlier, Marco. You said that the East 79th Street Neighborhood Association went and did a survey and found how many violators?
42, and I have the list, by the way. And
Okay,
I usually,
so let me ask you a
agree with
question then. What do you want to do with your list?
no, look.
I mean, what is the point of the list? Are you sending it to some enforcement agency, or what are you going to do?
No, okay. But the list was handed directly to the president of the East 79th Street Association, Betty.
Yes.
Betty, I don't know what she's gonna do, but it's more likely that she has been in conversation with the new boss of DOT. What is the name of? I forgot the name, but
it's Margaret Forgione.
Has good relations with Betty, and
I
don't know if Betty's going to.
It's Margaret. It's Margaret
yes,
Forgione. Yes.
Yes, that is the person. So I don't know if she's gonna address directly to her, or I don't know if she's gonna use 311 or the community board.
All right.
And it depends, but I don't know what's gonna move in that direction.
Okay. Well, I'll give Betty a call and see what she's gonna do with her list. But you're right. I mean, I think we're all agree that I think part of this committee is trying to work together with the small businesses, with the restaurants, to try to come up with a plan that's going to work for everyone going forward. Because if we wait for the electeds to do it, first of all, as you mentioned, what is permanent about a mayor who's going to be out of office in, how many months? We have almost an entire overturn of the city council coming, right? I mean, how many people are up a term limited and out?
35,
yeah. So, I mean, that behooves us also to be asking these types of questions to whoever these candidates are as to what their vision is and how they're going to bring this city back. And so I think that's part of our inquiry as citizens of this, Upper East Side and the city at large, to be asking real questions of these people who are running for office about what they're going to do about these issues that affect, our businesses and all our residents. So I think, I don't know, Alita, do we want to end on this point?
I do. I think that's fine. I'm sorry to cut you off, Valerie. I just
No.
wanted to mention that when both charter commissions were meeting and we had our task force, the community board had approved both times asking for a comprehensive city plan to be put on the ballot and included in city charter revisions. And it never got off the ground. There were various political groups against it. The other thing is that, as you may know, Borough President Gail Brewer is calling for, I guess, a street czar. And I don't know if she includes restaurants and open retail, but certainly for the use of the streets, which, considering that restaurants are in the streets, ought to include them. But we should find a way to maybe have a kind of a roundtable discussion, I think, and see what we can sort out, even if it's nothing specific, to see what kinds of questions we might want to ask of elected officials and what is important to the community. How many open restaurants, open retail, under what circumstances do we want? I mean, there have been complaints about live music outside of some of the restaurants in the evenings into the night. So there are a lot of issues, I'm sure many of which were not apparent to the administration when they set this up, but since it was so many months ago, they should have a better idea of what matters, and we should hear from the community as well. So we should figure out a way to do something. And
well, okay. I think we appreciate everyone's input tonight. We encourage, we'll try to put out an agenda for the next meeting sooner rather than later for next month. Our meeting next month is going to be the first Monday of February. And hopefully we can start this discussion on a more, robust way, because I think everybody on this call there's a consensus. We need to start planning, and or we need to let the people who have the authority know what we want to start seeing as a community when we fully reopen. So on that note, does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Marco's raised his hand.
Okay,
Is there a
second.
second?
Oh, I see Gail. I think I'll take Gail.
Yep, Gail is signaling
right.
yes.
And Kaz as well.
Okay. Look forward to Kaz's meeting tomorrow night.
It should be very interesting.
Yes, it should be very lively for those of you who want to tune in.
And thank you to members of the public who are here and participating. We wouldn't have this committee without you. We wouldn't have the Upper East Side without you. So we want to hear and be a vehicle for your voice to be heard by the government.
And for those of you in small business, pass along Shelby and Taylor's email, and do make use of your elected representatives. Thank you.
And the community board just posted a link to the meeting for tomorrow night for anyone who's interested. Thank you,
everybody.
Good night.